moments. Okay, so hey Amy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Not done loads this morning so far, but it's been a nice easy day. What about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, just like kind of thinking about this, and I've got a conference later today, so I've just been looking ahead to that really. So it's been quite a nice chilled out morning as well.
Yeah. What's the conference?
It's actually a new Genetic Counsellors Day, so it's a conference sort of specifically organised for genetic counsellors in the first couple of years of their career. So it's quite nice because it's quite like a safe sort of conference where it's quite nice to present at and that kind of a thing. So it's quite a cool thing that they organise for us.
Yeah, that's really good because I think like I've been at the Festival of Genomics this week and it is really good, but some of the stuff just goes completely over my head.
Yeah, same actually. It's really interesting, but a lot of it I'm like, that's very interesting, but
I didn't get it. Cool. So do you just want to give like a bit of info on like what specialism you're in, why you're based, that kind of thing, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course. So I'm specialising in genomic counselling, but I'll probably also call it genetic counselling.
Yeah.
It's kind of like two forms for the same job. This STP calls it genomic counselling, but people who often are in the job might call it genetic counselling. So I'm based in Newcastle at the moment, and I'm in my third year of the STP. So I'm kind of working towards hopefully completion this summer, which is really nice. I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about what genetic counselling is, or
Yeah, you can do. That's probably like a good bit of info for people maybe not so used to hearing it.
Yeah. So it's like, I guess, really quite broadly speaking, genetic counsellors see patients who are kind of at risk of or might be affected by or are affected by genetic conditions. It's kind of exploring like the genetics, the condition itself, and the impact that has on the patient, so any kind of risks to them. But also there's quite a strong focus on like the psychosocial aspects as well in genetic counselling, which is something I really like about the job. And it's, I guess, such a range of conditions. So a lot of our work is with people with family history of cancer, but also a lot of our work is just anything and everything really. So
yeah, you must see so many things come through, like that there are genetic conditions that I've never heard of. So if someone was like referred for that, I'd be like
yeah, 100%. I mean, you see like genetic counsellors in my department and I think, oh, like I'm a trainee, like obviously I won't know everything, but then actually you see genetic counsellors who are really experienced, doing the job 20 years or more, and they still come across conditions I've not heard of, because you can't possibly hear of every, like you say, there's just so many rare genetic conditions. But yeah, which is in a sense nice because you're always learning really.
And it's a lot of variety, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So what was your background to the STP then? How did you get onto the course?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to be a genetic counsellor for quite a long time, because I actually had genetic counselling myself when I was younger, so that was kind of what got me into the profession. But I did my undergrad was in human sciences, which is kind of a mix of social biological sciences. But before the STP, you had to go and do like a self-funded master's, which you can still do to become a genetic counsellor, and that wasn't something I thought I'd be able to sort of afford or get into for quite a long time. So I actually started training as a mental health social worker after graduation. Yeah, which was really interesting, really cool job. But it just it was really like a great experience, but it wasn't quite for me. And then at that time, kind of the position on the STP came up. But I think actually, even though it's quite different doing social work, it's been really helpful in my STP training and actually getting on the course as well. So it's kind of that sort of everything happens for a reason type thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I bet like with some people's journey through genetic counselling, that probably throws up quite a lot of mental health issues maybe for some people, so it's nice to have that kind of understanding as well.
Definitely, and it kind of gives you, obviously you do sort of training on the course, but it kind of gave me a bit of confidence going in when you sort of presenting with the more, like you say, challenging like psychosocial cases. That's the kind of where I feel quite comfortable, to be honest with you, whereas a lot more of my colleagues maybe had more of a genetics background, they're more comfortable with the genetics, so it's kind of you all learn together and use each other's expertise.
That's nice. So did you have much like understanding of genetics then before you started, or was it something that you kind of developed over time?
Yeah, definitely developed over time. So we did like a couple of genetics modules at uni, and then when I was applying to the STP, I did a few kind of online courses and stuff to kind of brush up. But a lot of the genetics, and I'd say most of the genetics that I actually use, is stuff that I've developed on the course. I think, a lot of people maybe had more of a genetics background than me, but that hasn't been something that's been a big issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I bet some people come on with quite like a genetics
Yeah,
heavy background, and then some people come on with a more like counselling support
yeah,
background. So it's quite that
definitely.
kind of grow you at the same pace. So that's quite
Yeah,
nice.
exactly. That's the thing you can, and that's what like I guess the first year, a lot of the first years for is kind of getting everyone on a level playing field as well. Because like you say, you just get such a variety of backgrounds, which is quite cool. Because then when you're at uni and that kind of thing, you get to learn so much from other people's prior experiences.
So what did you get up to like in first and second year? Sorry, that's quite a broad question.
No, it's a good, interesting question. First year was really cool because obviously on the STP we do like our rotations, and I think I had some really good experiences on rotations. So we did one in genetics, sort of more like lab based, which was really interesting. Like say for me coming from less of a genetics background, it really gave me an insight into actually the tests that we'd be doing. And I think even though it's not necessarily stuff that I now do every day, it makes me better at my job in that I'm better at requesting tests, and maybe I frustrate the clinical scientists a bit less, a bit more of an understanding of their processes. And we also did bioinformatics, which was quite similar, but I guess more specifically at how we kind of interpret genetic information and that kind of a thing, which again, not necessarily something I do day to day, but actually having that background and understanding is just so helpful when you kind of reading genetic reports and that kind of a thing. Also just really cool to see what everyone else does. And then kind of the other one was reproductive science. That was really cool as well. Again, like I say, it's not something you come across every day, but actually it gives you a lot more confidence when you're seeing patients who might be keen on things like Preimplantation genetic diagnosis, which is almost like similar to IVF process. So having that understanding of that kind of side of things means that you can go in a bit more depth with those patients. But it was really, just I love the rotations, and I think I still think back on them now, and I get cases and I think, oh yeah, that thing that I did in first year, that's actually coming up again now. So that was really fun. And then obviously sort of started to get settled in my my genetic counselling department and spent time rotation there in first year, which kind of then carried through for me into second year. It's gone from kind of, I guess, starting off observing a lot of clinics, observing a lot of meetings and that kind of thing, to slowly transitioning to taking on parts of consultations, to then taking your own consultations, to then moving towards doing more independent work, really. But I guess alongside that, you've got all your everything else that comes with it, like competencies and starting a research project in second year and everything. So it's it's nice to hear, actually.
It sounds like terrifying to me. Just it's like taking on the consultations and everything, but I guess they like ease you into it a bit.
Definitely. I think like for me, they've struck the perfect balance of like support but also promoting independence. So you never feel like you're pushed into anything you're not comfortable with, but at the same time, you never feel like frustrated with the step that you're at. You always moved on sort of appropriately to the next stage and that kind of a thing. It's very like, I don't know if you find, but I find as well, because it's quite like, it is quite trainee led as well. So you can they sort of take your lead as to when you feel comfortable for that next move, which I think is really nice. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's like so weird thinking back to the beginning of being terrified to do like one aspect of a consultation to now sort of taking on whole clinics on your own, and it's quite cool to think sort of where you've come from.
Definitely. So what kind of things do you see more often? What's like your bread and butter, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess from like so about half of our work is probably cancer, so that's something we see an awful lot of as a big group. And within that you see people most commonly, I guess, with family histories of like breast and ovarian cancer, which are sort of linked often to things like the BRCA genes, which people may not have heard of, and also family histories of bowel cancer and cancers associated with that. So they're like sort of the most common ones in the cancer area, but you do see all sorts really. With general sort of side of things, it's quite hard to say because there's so much variety. But things like cardiac conditions, sort of muscle conditions as well, like that kind of a thing are things you come across maybe more often. But there's a lot of stuff that's just so, it changes every week kind of a thing. Things like chromosome translocations as well, and kind of sort of chromosome changes just in general come up quite frequently. There's also some quite common genetic conditions maybe we used to see more of, but now actually they've been moved out to mainstream healthcare, which is really interesting. So things like cystic fibrosis can actually be, carrier testing can be done via the GP. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of how that sort of progresses and how more conditions probably will move in that direction into mainstream healthcare. future. So
that sounds really interesting. Like you must see so many different things during the
it's cool.
So oh, sorry.
Sorry, did it go on?
So when you said that you're running some of the like clinics yourself, in like a day, would you focus on patients with the same kind of diagnosis, like referrals, or would you have like one person for maybe prenatal diagnosis, one person for cancer?
So I think that actually it's one thing that definitely depends on what centre you work at. So in Newcastle, it kind of, for most of the genetic counsellors, they'll just have a clinic which just has sort of anything that's put in it. Whereas in a lot of centres, you do have sort of like a cancer clinic, a prenatal clinic, a general clinic. And actually in some centres, genetic counsellors sort of specialise in cancer or in general. So like if you're a genetic counsellor, that's what you do. That's quite common, but not in Newcastle. In Newcastle, most genetic counsellors kind of see a bit of everything. So it's quite interesting. I get quite excited still when you open your clinic list and you're like, oh, what have we got today then? It's quite nice to sort of keep that variety, which is a good part of the job. But yeah, I think also there's the benefit to sort of seeing, it depends on how you work really as to what you prefer. But yeah, quite a varied practice.
Yeah. How do you find it personally? Like I think I'd find it quite difficult just like emotionally sometimes, but do you get like kind of breaks if you found one case like particularly has gone close to home or something?
Yeah, I think like we've had I think there's a few things. Obviously there's always like certain cases that kind of just do a particular way. As part of like the genetic counselling registration board, genetic counsellors should access supervision or should have access to supervision, which is somewhere that you can always go and take these cases, which I found really helpful with the ones that sat with me. But sort of more in an immediate sense, I think your team's always very supportive. If you ever need, any kind of debrief or more of an informal supervision as well, I've definitely had cases where I've been in clinic and I've just come upstairs and said like, can we just talk about this? And there's always kind of someone there, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think it's unavoidable that you will get those cases. But I think for me, like the support of the wider team and actually access to that supervision as well is really helpful. But it is an important skill, sort of being able to, manage that and not let it spill over into personal life. I think it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. So how big is your team? Are there any other like trainees with you?
Yeah, so I think we're not like a massive team as far as clinical genetics go, but there is another STP trainee in my department, which is really great. It's really nice. We get on really well and like really support each other. Well, I think she definitely supports me anyway. I think that's really nice. The department's not huge, but it's such a quite a close knit. Everyone gets along really well, and it's full of experience. So you're just always learning from everybody and having a nice, you look forward to going to work, which I think is really nice. But I do think having another trainee, she's actually in her second year at the minute, and it's just been such a nice thing for me.
Yeah, that is really good. So I've forgotten what I was going to say. What has your research project been like? That's what I was going to say. So I've not actually spoken to anyone yet, I don't think, that started their research project. So this is
yeah, it's really interesting actually, because so the sort of pandemic situation has massively changed the research project. They suspended ethics applications for students just like the day that I was planning on submitting my ethics application.
That is always the way.
And I spent an awful lot of time, like it takes a lot of time, so I was quite disappointed at the time because it meant I wasn't going to be able to do the research project I spent sort of quite a lot of months prepping for, and it's a lot of effort to get sponsorship and get to the stage of submitting for ethics. So actually what we've had to do instead is do a service evaluation, which is sort of a similar, it's not the same question obviously because it's not a research question, it's a service evaluation, but it's in a similar group of patients that I was going to be sort of interviewed hopefully for my research project. At first I was really disappointed because I really wanted to do the research and have that experience, but actually it's been amazing what's come out of the service evaluation that I think will actually impact practice. And also I think like the service evaluation will provide me quite a good base to potentially then do that research in the future as well, if I thought the department would support that. So yeah, it's definitely been better than anything like it. So it's been new. I've learned a lot, but I've actually really enjoyed it. I was quite worried about the research project, to be honest with you, when I started the STP, but it's been one of the I'm quite glad I've had the opportunity to do, even though it's kind of gone a bit wrong for me.
a bit pear-shaped. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's always that like initial disappointment, isn't there, when something doesn't quite go to plan, but it's about how like you carry on from that, I guess.
Exactly, completely. And still got value. I sort of thought, oh no, like the service evaluation, like it'll just be kind of doing it to tick a box and I won't get anything. And actually the responses we've got from patients have been absolutely amazing. And it's given us such a good insight into that group. So yeah, I was disappointed, I'm not gonna lie, but actually I'm really pleased with how it's sort of turning out. We'll see how I feel about that in April, May.
Definitely. I guess it's such a personal thing, isn't it, that people might feel like, or people might give more insight. Oh, hello.
She loves it when I'm talking to someone. Sorry, she always wants to come and say hello.
No, my cat, if I've got my laptop on my lap, my cat will come and worm his way underneath it.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you give attention to anything but me?
Yeah.
I guess it's, no, it's all right, because it's such a personal thing and you're really like supporting maybe multiple members of a family through something. People might enter into kind of surveys and things like that and improvement things a lot more than with other sectors, I guess.
We have like a really good response rate actually, like higher than sort of, like say like expected from the literature and that kind of a thing. And even that in itself, like you say, like potentially says something about like the value of the service and the sort of empathy. And a lot of people sort of said it as like a thank, they were like, oh thank you so much, I want to be able to help, sort of, because I had this experience, which was really nice actually to read.
That is good. It must be so rewarding. So I feel like I say it in every specialism, but this one, like, and reproductive science, I think must be like so rewarding to be able to see them through a whole process.
Yeah, and I think actually it's interesting you mentioned reproductive science, because one thing that I haven't maybe talked about is the sort of prenatal aspect of genetics as well, where you're kind of supporting families who either want to get pregnant or are pregnant, have that family history of a genetic condition. And for me, that's one of the most rewarding aspects of the role, because you really do, like you say, sort of see that process through, and you get to sort of know the, like say, often not just in the prenatal aspect, but you kind of sometimes get to know families and that kind of thing. And it is, like I say, I think every specialism is so rewarding, isn't it? I definitely I do find it a really rewarding role.
That's so good. Do you see them a lot post giving them the results? So once you've like kind of given the patient the result, do they often come back, or is that kind of a patient by patient situation?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question actually. It does depend. Sometimes it's patient by patient, but also it can be obviously depending on the result. So often if it's a good news result, you don't necessarily see them again. That's actually what my service evaluation is about. It's seeing whether those people who get a good news result would benefit, like if our service kind of does support them sufficiently, or if they need any additional input. Whereas sometimes if patients get what you might think of a bad news result, we will typically offer like further appointments. But that actually also depends on the condition, because sometimes someone else is best placed to follow them up following that news too. But also it is kind of, we do have in Newcastle like an open door policy, so it's always the case of, even if you haven't arranged an appointment for you right now, this is my number. If you would like to talk further, or if you want another appointment, just kind of get in touch. So it does end up kind of being patient by patient, really. Yeah, I don't know if that's a bit of a funny one, but
no, yeah, it definitely does. Because I guess even a good news result for some patients might trigger like quite a lot of things post event if they've kind of worked up in their head that it's going to be like a bad news situation.
And like, it's like, as I say, it's not just the result, it's the whole process is quite, it's quite challenging psychologically anyway, even if you do end up with, like you say, that sort of good news result at the end. And I think some sort of things that people talk about is sort of that survivor's guilt as well. Siblings maybe have different results to them, and also the impact on family dynamics. Sometimes we're all going, like, especially if you get families getting tested at the same, we're all going through it together, and then you have different, and it can be really challenging. Like I say, even if you've got that what you consider to be good news, it also doesn't take away your family history as well, if you've got a family history, and that's something that can be quite built into people's identities. And even though it's good news in that sense, it can take sort of processing time, and also believing, say if it's say for example a breast cancer family history, and then you're told actually you're at population risk, so then you don't have any additional screening even though you've got this family history. And although that's what the science says, it's actually believing that in yourself for some people too. There's a lot, like you say, it's a lot. It's in the process itself, not just in the result.
How have you found it change during COVID? Has it really impacted? I'm guessing it's a yes. But
It's what do you want, really, isn't it? Because I think in some ways I feel obviously it has, so the main impact for us, and it has varied a lot from different centres, I think. We sort of made moved to more telephone and video consultations, I guess, as you might expect.
yeah,
So for me, it kind of came at a time when I was sort of going a bit more independent and just sort of getting to grips with my own clinic, and then sort of everything was switched on its head. Obviously, I think it's had a massive impact in the sense of what we've done, but it's just meant, for me, it's not necessarily meant that I've learned less or had less experiences. It's just been that those experiences have been different to what they would have been had the pandemic happened. Obviously, it has also had that little bit of an impact on my research project. That's probably the biggest impact it's had for me. But I know that other centres kind of closed completely, so didn't have appointments for quite a long period of time and that kind of a thing. So yeah, it's really, actually, when you think about it, it's quite it's hard to comprehend, really, when you sort of started it out. This is not how I would have sort of thought it would be finishing off. But I do feel lucky in a sense that I'm in a specialism where it hasn't been impacted, it hasn't been as stressful as maybe it has been for a lot of other people. So sort of recognise that, quite a lucky position to be
in. Definitely. Telephone interviews or like telephone consultations must be quite difficult because you can't see like someone's body language and like the little things that you normally would if you were
Yeah, definitely. I think they all sort of have their pros and cons. I think telephone was quite hard at first because, as you say, you just don't, like, you get so much from the non-verbal cues that people give you. And sort of when you're talking about genetics, you can sort of tend to be able to see whether either they're sort of, ooh, like nodding along, that kind of a thing, or whether you know that you've completely bored them or confused them. And you can adjust that accordingly, whereas it is a lot harder over the phone. I think for some people, having sort of remote appointments has improved accessibility. You know, genetics centres are regional services, and people, even though we have sort of outreach clinics, people often have to travel quite far, and that can put them off accessing our services, actually. So being able to do things over the telephone or video does have definitely some advantages in that respect. So it's, yeah, definitely there's some challenges, but also the more you do it, you do kind of pick up other things, I guess. So that's been a real different sort of skill set to learn, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess it's just something that's like always changing at the moment, but it's good to kind of get processes into place that might benefit people in the future.
Exactly. And it's like, I think even in the future, even, when things can go a bit more back to whatever normal is, I guess. I guess it's that thing of, yes, it'd be nice to be able to have more of those face-to-face appointments, but also maintaining some of the things we've had to do. So maintaining more of the telephone appointments, more of the video for those people that it would be helpful for. Sort of a lesson, really.
Yeah. Have you found, just because I know in genomics it's been quite a big thing recently, so I don't know if that's spilled over with you, that in the last like few years where you've been doing it, ethics has like not changed maybe, but become more like a little bit altered or whatever. That's badly worded, but
it's such a good point, isn't it? Because in genetics, I guess you've got the big thing of the information that you have for a patient is directly applicable to blood relatives, which is a major thing in sort of challenging ethical situations. And I think you've had a lot of sort of, well, not a lot, but you've had some of these like high profile court cases coming through and that kind of a thing. So they've been in the media, and also the rise of sort of more mainstreaming, and also things like direct to consumer genetic testing and that kind of a thing, which all kind of impact that sort of genetics in society and also clinical genetics. So I think it is definitely something that has been, like you say, sort of coming along. Maybe, like you say, not necessarily changing in a sense of the ethics, but sort of it makes you think of how we'll go in the future to sort of approaching these issues. So have you found it sort of something that's come across a lot in your practice within genomics?
I think there's always just questions in genomics, isn't it? Like ethics is just a big part, rightly so. But yeah, I just remember seeing something about, I'm probably going to get the facts wrong or something, a court case about a dad with Huntington's, and then his daughter was pregnant, and he didn't want that information to be passed on. And it is a really interesting issue.
And it's like, who do you have duty of care towards? If dad's your patient, is it to him? But do you have a duty sort of to, and it's that sort of harm reduction thing as well. And in genetics, often by reducing, not often, but in these cases, by reducing harm to one person, you might be increasing the harm to another, whether that's like medically, psychologically, that kind of a thing. And it is things we come across. I mean, you have things like obviously multidisciplinary teams, like probably come across yourself, where you can discuss these kind of issues, and also the trust ethics committees, which can be really helpful in sort of resolving and working with patients to resolve these issues that you can come across, and also things like, I don't know if you've ever been to genetics.
No.
Yeah, really
Write
would
it
recommend.
down.
Really would recommend sort of, and that's people from across the country really can bring cases and have them discussed, and so there are those forums. I think that's one of the things that can be challenging, but like you say, I think it's important to, whenever you get a case like that, you've got to make sure it's not something that's appropriate for you to deal with on your own, and to take those to those wider, sometimes national kind of teams, but yeah, it's like you say, it's just going to happen more and more, isn't it, that we get these kind of ethical cases as such.
Yeah, definitely. Have you had many cases that have been quite difficult, maybe in that aspect of trying to like softly encourage family members to maybe share their results with other people that could be affected, or are people normally quite open to sharing?
I'd say that, like, generally speaking, in my like very limited experience, on the whole, people are quite happy to share. Sometimes even sometimes families where there maybe are difficulties with communication, they're often happy to sort of find other ways around that. So you can work with patients to find like an appropriate way to share that information, if sort of normal channels wouldn't work for them. I haven't personally had a case that's been sort of like a case that I've led on, that's been really challenging in this sense. There's maybe been some in departments, but I think that they don't, more often than not, people are happy to share that information, and where they're not, it's kind of like working together to find a solution that works for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it must just be like a bit of a minefield sometimes, not knowing like where to start. But cool. So did you have much counselling experience then? Or I know, like you said, you did the mental health training. Was there a lot of counselling experience in that, or is it?
Yeah, so definitely like not like so when I was at uni, I was a peer supporter, and that was like we did sort of formal counts, like obviously you're not a counsellor, but you did sort of a period of counselling training for that, which was really useful. And then also when I did, like you say, the mental health social work, well, again, we weren't counsellors, but you did get a lot of teaching and counselling theories and counselling skills kind of a thing. And I think that's quite similar, actually. A lot of that's overlapped with what we're then taught on the STP, like the counselling skills, and you get a lot of opportunities to practice those in sort of role plays and that kind of a thing in those kind of safe environments. I think, so yeah, I would say I had like, not like major, but I had sort of some experience of counselling training and roles where, like I say, not as a counsellor, but utilising those counselling skills, which have definitely become useful. I think for people who like want to become a genetic counsellor, it's useful to get that, just sort of to get an idea for yourself how it feels doing that kind of a thing, and whether that's something you enjoy or not.
Yeah, definitely. So off the back of that then, I guess, do you have any kind of tips for applying? The application process has obviously changed a lot in the last couple of years. But for someone maybe applying with not like direct genetic counselling experience.
Yeah, I would say like absolutely. So obviously the application is changing. It's a bit difficult because it means be less specific. But I think getting that care experience is really important. And like you say, people acknowledge that it's really hard to get sort of experience in genetic counselling departments, but actually any role where you're sort of in that caring capacity is really important for the application, but also for you to kind of build those skills and to get a feel for whether it's something you actually want to do. I think, keep on top of current affairs in genetics and healthcare more widely, and definitely try and, interact with genetic counsellors. So it's definitely not always possible to get direct, like say, work experience in a genetics department, but loads of centres put on things like genetic counselling open days, and a lot of these currently are online as well, so you're not kind of limited geographically with that. Just to have a really good idea of what the role actually entails. You can also do like there's online courses. I think there's one on FutureLearn that sometimes runs, that's sort of like about genetic counselling, and that's really interesting. And I guess I could babble for ages really, but just really sort of more of an interest, and finding out these different maybe like also like Twitter's got quite a good like healthcare science community, I find. And there's a genetic counselling kind of community on there. So really, yeah, all getting the experience that you need, but also just immersing yourself in all of that information to learn as much about it and just to find out whether you think it's a good fit for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Perfect. Well, I think you've really helped me as well because I've got my counselling rotation like in a few months. So
Of course, you guys do a counselling rotation down in genomics, don't you?
Yeah, we do the same rotations as you actually. So I'm about to start my bioinformatics one, and then we've got reproductive science as well.
Oh wow! Oh, how are you very excited to do your rotations?
Yeah, I am really excited. We finished the genetics one, and that was good. I think I'm, what's the word? Not nervous, but apprehensive for the counselling one, just because I've never done anything like that before. But I'm sure it'll be really interesting, and it'll be good to kind of get a more holistic view of what genetics can like bring to patients.
You get to see that whole process, don't you? Like how you fit in that. But I think as well, I mean, I was the same way about my genetics one. So and I was out of my depth, but it was so supportive and just kept everything at a really sort of achievable level. So I'm sure it'll be similar for you.
Let's hope so. Fingers crossed. Perfect. So do you have any like last things that you want to say, or I think you've given loads of really good info, so
just thank you to you. I think it's so cool that you're doing this series, and it's really amazing to get an insight, into all the different specialisms. I think it's so interesting out there, even for someone who's already kind of on the STP journey, and I'm sure what you're doing is like really helpful for loads of different people. So it's been wonderful to talk to you. I feel quite really privileged to be part of it anyway.
Thank you, Chuck. No, it's been lovely to speak with you as well. Like I just love getting an insight, and especially when, not that other specialisms aren't really exciting, but I have more of like a knowledge of this one, I guess. So
yeah, you have a good idea of all the inner workings.
Perfect. Well, I hope you have a nice rest of your day.
You too.
Is it your study day today? You were saying.
Yeah. So yeah, nice way to end the week.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so have a nice weekend as well. You reminded me. Every day just kind of blurs into one at the moment.
I know the days blend into weeks but yeah, have a lovely weekend.
Yeah. Fab. Perfect. Bye-bye.
Bye.